Welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be continuing on with our macOS development with AppKit tutorial series. And in this particular tutorial we are going to be taking a look at the NSStepper in AppKit. Now, what is an NSStepper? Well, an NSStepper is a pretty simple control. It is a very small control that contains two buttons for incrementing a value and decrementing a value. It's as simple as that. There's no field associated with it, no label associated with it, at least not any visual label associated with it or anything like that. Right? So how exactly then do we use this? How are we able to see what the value stored in the stepper is? Well, we do that with a static label or a text field that we have to put in the interface on our own, and then either use Cocoa bindings to bind them to the same value, or B, we can create a value and then have an event or an action that gets fired off every time you increment or decrement the stepper, and then set the string value of our text field or our label with the float value stored in our stepper that way. We're not going to use Cocoa bindings in this video because we want the more simple approach. The Cocoa bindings is a little bit more complicated, and we'll need to learn more about how AppKit works and all of that kind of stuff before we can get into Cocoa bindings. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. In order to create an NSStepper, the first step is, of course, like anything else, to create an object for that user interface control. So up at the top of our view controller, let's see here. There we go. You can see I have a segmented control and a text field already created. For this stepper, we are going to call it, we're going to call this just stepper. So var stepper equals NSStepper and an empty initializer. And that is our stepper created. It's the object created. Now we can configure it. Alright, so now let's go ahead and configure our stepper by saying stepper dot, and then there are a few properties here that we can use. The first one being the first one that we're going to set is a minimum min value, right? And what this is going to do is it's going to set the minimum value that our stepper's value can be. If we go beyond that, it just won't go any further. So we can say min value, we'll set it equal to 0. And then we can also set a maximum value. Stepper.max value. And we will set this, we'll set this value to, let's see, let's go into calculator. And then we'll say 1024 Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll use a math operation here just to get the value that we want. We want 1024 times 1024. So that'll be 1 petabyte pretty much, because our text field is going to be represents sort of a number of gigabytes. So the maximum value is going to be 1024 terabytes. All right. And there we go. So now that we have our minimum and our maximum value, we can also say if we want the value to wrap, right? So if we reach our maximum value, what value wraps does, that property is a Boolean property, and it will tell the stepper, hey, if you go beyond the maximum, wrap back around to the minimum value. So it'll go straight back to our value of 0. We aren't going to set that. But what we're going to do here real quick is we want to make sure that we can listen for when one of the buttons in the stepper is clicked, and then make sure that we can set the value in our text field accordingly. So for that, we need a target and we need an action. So target by default is nil, but we're going to set it to nil explicitly, and then we're going to create an action to to listen for when that event fires off. So we'll say stepper dot target equals nil, and stepper dot action is equal to a hashtag selector. And this method that we want to call whenever we increment or decrement a value is we want stepper value changed. Simple as that. Now let's enable programmatic constraints. So stepper dot translates auto resizing mask into constraints equals false, like that. All right. We are also going to make sure that we add our stepper as a subview here. Now, if you're wondering where this add subviews method is coming from on our view object, it's coming from an extension that I have. It's a convenience thing, so I don't have to keep writing view.addSubview, view.addSubview, view.addSubview every single time I need to add a subview, and instead I can just call one method that takes an array of NS views, and so I can add them all in one call, which is nice. So it's just a convenience thing. So now all right, so now let's go ahead and create our constraints before I go ahead and create the method that we need for for our action of our stepper. First things first is the stepper itself. So let's say stepper dot center y anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to the center x or center y anchor of our view. Simple as that. And stepper dot trailing anchor dot constraint constraint is equal to view trailing anchor with a constant of -20. Now, those are the only constraints that we need for our stepper. Why is that? Well, remember how I mentioned that with auto layout, each view needs an X, Y, width, and height in order for the constraints to be valid? Well, the NSStepper already has a default width and height. It's a very small control. macOS already has a default size for it, so we don't need to worry about that. We just need to worry about its X and Y position. So that is why I set the center Y anchor and the trailing anchor. So we have an X position where it's 20 units away from the trailing edge of our view, and then we set the center Y anchor of our stepper to be the center to be the center of our view vertically. So now auto layout has all the information it needs for our stepper. Now let's go ahead and create our text fields constraints. We want this to also be centered vertically, but we want its trailing edge to be 20 units away from the stepper's leading edge. And then we want the text field's leading edge to be 20 units away from the view's leading edge. All right, so let's go ahead and put that into code here. So we'll say value field dot center y anchor dot constraint is equal to the center y anchor of our view, like that. And then value field dot leading anchor dot constraint. We're going to set that equal to the view's leading anchor with a constant of 20, like that. All right, and now the trailing anchor. So value field dot trailing anchor dot constraint is equal to the stepper dot leading anchor with a constant of -20. All right, now what we're going to do is we are going to have our segmented control directly beneath our text field and our stepper. So the top anchor of our segmented control is going to be 20 units away from the bottom anchor of our text field, and its leading and trailing anchors are going to be 20 units away from the leading and trailing anchors of our view, respectively. So let's go ahead and put that into code now as well. So we'll say increment amount control leading anchor dot constraint is equal to view leading anchor with a constant of 20. Then we'll have our increment amount control dot trailing anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to view trailing anchor with a constant of 20. And then we want increment amount control dot top anchor dot constraint is going to be equal to value field dot bottom anchor with a constant of 20, like that. All right, now let's go ahead and create that action method. So at objc private func it is going to be a stepper value changed. Stepper value changed. And this can optionally take a stepper. So we're going to say stepper NSStepper like that. All right. So now this method is taking an NSStepper, and this method will get called every time the value goes up or down in the stepper. Now we can say var, or not even var, we'll say let formatter equals number formatter number style equals decimal formatter minimum fraction digits equals 0, formatter maximum fraction digits and then we'll set the maximum fraction digits also to 0. All right, and that should be good to go. Now we can set the value field dot string value equals formatter dot string. We gotta unwrap that from NS number value stepper dot float value. All right. And that should okay. So we got a build failure. Let's fix that. All right, value of optional type string. Okay. All right. Okay. So that needs to be unwrapped. Label for segment. All right. Let's run that. Build succeeded. Now we have our user interface. Okay, so the first thing that we see is our text field. It's currently at 0. Or at least it's just blank right now. We'll increment this. It's at 1. And you can see it goes up every single time that the value changes. All right, so we can see that we have 0 here, so we're good. Everything's working so far. Now, you can see that in our segmented control, we have 1 selected, and the segment's bezel color is teal. You can change that. You can change the color of a segment's bezel color when it's selected by using the selected segment bezel color property. Let's say we want to increment by 1024. Well, we can do that. All right. So it looks like, okay. Let's try that again. Okay, so we can see that something isn't right here. The increment value is not being set when we change the value in our segmented control. Now, why is that? Well, the reason for that is because we didn't set the increment property of our stepper. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So here we'll then say stepper dot increment equals increment amount. All right. And we should also make sure that we set that in view did load. All right, so we'll say stepper dot increment equals increment amount. All right. All right. All right, and then we'll set increment amount is equal to or rather self dot increment amount increment amount, like that. All right. All right. So let's say self increment amount. All right. So now if we run our code, we have build failure. All right, so yeah. All right, so we have our increment amount being set. And then we just want stepper dot increment equals increment amount, like that. All right, save it, run it. Okay, so what we can do, I guess, is say, instead of int, we'll say double, like that, and then try to run it. Okay. Okay, so I think okay. There we go. All right, build succeeded. We fixed all of our errors. Now, let's change this to 1024 and see what happens. All right, so right now our text field is blank. Our stepper's at 0. Let's go ahead and increment that. Now you can see 1024, 2048, 3072. And it can just keep on going for as long as you need it to. So we can just keep holding the up arrow down here with the voiceover focus on our stepper, and you can see it just keeps going and going and going. So that pretty much does it for this video on NSStepper. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.